Welcome everybody, this is the SharePoint Patterns and Practices webcast, and this time we're going to have a talk around the Office 365 connectors, and so concentrating on what they actually are and what are the development opportunities or customization opportunities around this Office 365 connectors. My name is Vesa Juvonen, I'm a Senior Program Manager from SharePoint Engineering, and with me here is Paolo Bialorsi. So Paolo, will you do quick intros as well?
Yes, thank you, Vesa. I'm a senior consultant working in a company of my own. I'm an MVP on Office Server and Services, and I'm focused on SharePoint and Office 365 since my early days.
Sounds good. Sounds good. I'm always having fun with Paolo's title because he's working in a company of his own, so he's choosing to use the senior consultant. You could be a CIO or CTO as well, but anyway, it's a matter of a mood of the day, what title you're using.
Exactly.
Anyway. So let's actually get moving. Before we go to the actual content, let's have a quick look on the PnP. So SharePoint Patterns and Practices, want to make sure that everybody gets this. Free code samples, reusable solutions, reusable components, guidance documentation in MSDN, and also in the GitHub and in the dev.office.com and so on. We do have monthly community calls, bi-weekly special interest group calls for people to follow up on what's happening. All of that is getting recorded and it's available in YouTube, in our YouTube channel. The themes are around SharePoint Framework, which is the new stuff, SharePoint add-ins, also for SharePoint Online and on-premises, and then Microsoft Graph and Office 365 APIs. Today we kind of concentrate on the Office 365 connectors, which falls on the ladder or the last category of the sections. HTTP AKMS, SharePoint PnP is the address where you can go and have a look on all of the different webcasts, all of the different resources, what's available. But let's actually deep dive on the actual content of today, and I'll let Paolo lead this, and then I'm going to jump in and ask questions whenever needed. So take it away, Paolo.
Okay, thank you. So, first of all, we need to figure out what an Office 365 connector is. And basically, the Office 365 connectors are extensions for the Office 365 groups and teams. And those extensions allow us as developers, as well as third parties, to send messages or information or events toward a group to make available information, live information to users that are consuming a group. They are based on the idea of using the webhooks technology, which is a consolidated technology and well-known technology, which is really often used in modern site development. And they are based on JSON messages sent over HTTPS against a target group. Whenever we send any content or any event to a group, we use objects which are called cards from a connector's perspective. And right now, we can have about 100 Office 365 connectors available on a connectors catalog, which is a public catalog which we can use to search for connectors and through which we can simply install and use ready-to-go connectors. And just to give you an idea of the growth trend of the connectors, just a few months ago, there were less than half of those connectors available in the catalog, about 50 connectors. So it is a catalog which is growing really, really fast. And we believe that you as developers, as Office 365 and SharePoint developers, could be really interested in creating your own connectors, making them available in the catalog as well. And that's why we are talking with you about this topic today. From an architectural perspective, whenever you have an Office 365 group in your tenant, you can simply connect your group with an external connector just by following an HTTP GET request through a nice orange button that you will see pretty soon in a demo. And that button will just make an HTTP request against a backend system, which could be, for example, a provider-hosted application for SharePoint Online or for Office 365 more in general. And by getting this HTTP GET request, the provider hosted application will be able to register itself against the group, of course waiting for a kind of an approval from an authorized user, and then it will be able to send messages represented as JSON objects through an HTTP post request. That's the overall idea, and it is a really, really simple and easy architecture. You register a provider which will provide cards through HTTP requests targeting a webhook endpoint. So really, really simple.
Quick comment on and a quick point on that one before we're moving ahead. So on the just being super clear. So even though it says provider hosted app, it doesn't necessarily mean add-in. It doesn't necessarily mean anything like that. So it could be just a website hosted in Azure, which is then registered. All right. So it's not really really kind of a classic SharePoint hosted add-in or even Office 365 app. Well, it again depends how do we define those terms, but still.
Still a web application hosted somewhere through a provider, exactly. Not the one we are used to use or to define when we talk about SharePoint provider hosted add-ins. That's not the case. Okay.
Exactly.
And in order to create your own Office 365 connectors, you have at least two choices. The first one is the easy one, so take it easy, as the title says. And if you want to just create a connector which will be used to extend just one Office 365 group, you can simply create on the fly a connector using the UI of the groups, and you will get back a URL which will be the webhook URL that you can use later on as a target endpoint to send your cards to. So it's really easy, and we will show you pretty soon in a demo, but you just need to follow the UI provided through the Office 365 Groups environment, and you will be ready to register on the fly a new webhook and a new connector. Of course, this kind of easy solution is not suitable for the catalog, so you will be able to create a connector which will be available just for one group, and you can't reuse those kind of connectors in any other groups, and you cannot provide them to third parties through the catalog. So let's move to the first demo of this webcast, and let's see how you can create such kind of easy connectors for Office 365 groups. So let's move to my demo environment, and first of all, let's open the web browser. Here I have my mailbox through my Outlook Web Access UI, and as you probably know, I can create any new group just using the UI of my mailbox by pressing the Create button here just beside the group's title. Here I can select a group model. I will go for the standard one. I will give a name, which can be Connectors Webcast. I can provide a description if I like, and of course it could be a public or a private group, and I can have a basic reference language for that group. I will create it. I will assign a couple of people as members, for example, Vesa and Erwin, and I'm done. My group will be ready to go in a matter of a few seconds. Here it is, and from this UI I can click on the Connectors button here in the upper right corner of the screen, and I can first of all go through all of the connectors available in the connectors catalog, which are quite a lot, as I told you, but I can also use the incoming webhook connector, which is not a real one, but is just a way to create on the fly a new endpoint to send cards to my current group. So I will add this guy to the connectors of my group. I will have to provide a name, which could be Sample Easy Connector. Okay, I can upload an image if I want. It's not really fundamental right now. And I can create my webhook. The result of these actions will be that I will get back, as you can see here, a URL, which is kind of unreadable, but who cares? It has just to be used in the backend in our own system. I can copy the URL of this webhook, which will be the endpoint I can target whenever I want to send a card toward my target group. So I'm done. let me use any kind of HTTP client to send a test card against my group, and I will use Fiddler, for example. So I will close this screen, and as you can see, first of all, I have a message in my conversation wall that informs me that I have a new connector connected to my group. And then if I go, for example, to Fiddler here, and I use the composer, I can make an HTTP post request targeting the endpoint that I just copied from the UI of the webbook creation. My card will have to be a JSON message, so I will have to say that the content type of my request is application JSON, and inside the content of the body of my request, I can say, for example, that I want to send a card which will have one title, which will be Connectors Webcast title, and it will have also a text which will be the real content. Oh, sorry for the typo. It will be the real content of the card, which can be the real content of the card. Of course, what else? So
yes,
I can.
It's the actual content of the card. Yeah.
Exactly. So I can make an HTTP post request against that URL. Providing an application JSON content, and as you will see, it will take a while the first time because the webbook infrastructure will have to be started somehow. But as you can see, I've got a 200 response, which is totally okay. It's an okay response. And if I go back to my browser, you can see I have a new activity here. If I click this button, I can see that I have a new incoming webbook message, which will be connector webcast title with the real content of the card. So pretty easy.
And this is actually the easiest way to kind of also maybe to test, to do initial testing of your custom thingy as well. Or how would you use this? Well, what's the value of this incoming webhook thingy?
Well, for example, you can use it just for testing purposes. So if you want to play with cards, if you want to see how the cards behave based on the syntax you have in the JSON which represents the card, you can play with it. And to be fair, there is also a kind of a playground area in the dev.office.com site that can be reached through the dev.office.com site, which allows you to play with all of the flavors, different flavors that you have for the cards, which can be really, really complex if you want, with buttons, with images, tables, and stuff like that. And so you can play with the JSON messages just using this technique or using the playground area. On the other side, if you simply want to extend one group and only one group, you already have a kind of custom solutions which can send JSON messages, but you simply need to have the webbook URL. You can use this technique to do a manual registration of your webbook. Of course, if you plan to have multiple groups or multiple customers with many groups that want to use the same technology and the same connector, this solution is not enough. You need to create a real connector. Okay.
Absolutely makes sense. Makes sense.
That's why now we will go back to the presentation deck and we will share with you how to create a real connector. So, first of all, you have to go to the Connectors Developer Dashboard, which is a URL, a website and a web page through which you can play with the connectors technology. You can register your connectors and you can see all of the reference documentation to create a real connector. And if you go to this link, this go.microsoft.com forward link and whatever else in the URL, this nice URL will bring you to a UI which allows you to do the registration from scratch of a fresh new connector which will be available in your tenant-wide, and that can be used in all of your Office 365 groups if you want. There you will have to provide some registration information, and I will show you pretty soon in the next demo what information you have to provide. And just after that, you will get back a bunch of HTML code, which will be the HTML code including the orange button you saw in the architectural schema. And that orange button will have an hyperlink under the cover that can be pressed can be followed by a user who want to register, you want to connect your connector to a target group. In fact, right now, at the time of this recording, as far as I know, there is no way to do an unattended or an automatic registration and connection of a connector with a target group. But we still need to have somebody who will click a button or who will add the connector through the UI we just saw in the previous demo. Maybe, I don't know, it's my guess at least. I don't know if Vesa has any insight that can share, but it's my hope that sooner or later we will be able to automatically connect a group and a connector together, because it would be really, really useful.
No doubt.
No doubt. Yeah. Okay. So tell to anybody in the product group that we need it. So that said, you will get back the HTML which can be used to create the connection. And if you want to just play around the connectors, you can also use the playground area, the connector sandbox area, which can be really useful just to play, as I told you a few minutes ago, just to play with the cards and to see what happens whenever you send any kind or any flavor of cards against a target group. Once you are done, once you have defined your connector in the connector dashboard and you have registered it, once you have got back the connection button, and once you have defined the shape of your cards, you are ready to register your connector in the catalog and in the public store, so that if you want, and just if you want, you will be able to make available your connector not only to your tenant, but to every tenant worldwide through the public catalog. Whenever you register and you create your own connectors, you will have to provide a URL which will be used for the registration step, and this URL will be the one under the cover of the registration button. And in the URL there will be a bunch of, or just a few query string arguments, which will be a custom state argument, which can be whatever you like. Is it a text argument, which can be used to provide some custom information to your connector infrastructure, as you will see pretty soon in the demo. You have to provide the application ID, which is a global unique identifier, which uniquely identifies your connector, as well as a callback URL, which is a URL you have to implement in your own solution, and which will be called by the registration UI whenever a user will connect your connector with a group. So basically, when the end user will click the orange button or will do the connection through the connectors UI of the groups, the Office 365 infrastructure will go through a page which will be the connection page, which will have those information like the ID and the callback URL in the query string. And as soon as the end user will click a button to create, physically create the connection between your connector and the group, the browser of the end user will be redirected to the callback URL, which will be a page you have to create from scratch, and which will get still through the URL, through the query string, 4 parameters, 4 arguments. The first one is the state, which is the one you can provide in the previous screen just to give some custom information to your connector. There is the group name, which is the group to which the connector is going to be connected. There is the webhook URL, which will be the URL you will have to use to send all of your cards in order to target that specific group. And lastly, in case of any issue, in case of any error, you will get an error argument in the query string, which so far, right now, can just assume the value of access denied or invalid requests. Access denied happens whenever the user denies the connection. So instead of clicking the connect button, we'll say, no, I don't want to connect your connector with my group. And so you will get back an access denied in your callback URL page. Or, on the other side, in case of any other kind of issue, you will get an invalid request. That's all so far. So again, really, really easy and simple, but really fully functional for the purpose. once you are ready, once you have the webhook URL, you can make HTTP post requests against that webhook URL, and you can post the JSON messages, and remember to provide the content type application JSON in the HTTP headers of your request, and you will be ready to play with your connector. Whenever you send a card using a connector, you can get back any of these response codes. Of course, the 200 is the one you will desire to have, but you can also have issues like bad request if your card is not well formed based on the syntax available for cards, or you can have a 404 if for any reason the webhook has gone and does not exist anymore, or you can have a payload too large if you send a too big card through the request, or if you get throttled and you have and you get back the 429, the well-known 429 for throttling and too many requests. So those are the responses that you should be able to handle in your custom implementation of the client, the HTTP client that will send the cards against the group through the webhook. So again, that said, I think that if we see how to do that, it will be much more clear than talking for a while about it. So no more words and much more practical stuff. Let's go back to Visual Studio and to the demo environment, and let's see how to create a real connector using .NET.
That sounds good.
So I will move to my browser again, and here, still using this connector, this group, we will connect a new connector that we already have in place. So first of all, I will start Visual Studio. I mean the project I have in Visual Studio, which is this guy, Office 365 Connectors. And this project will be available in the PnP repository, github.com/SharePoint/PnP under the samples folder, and you will find it with this name, Office 365 Connectors. So you can download it and play with it just to figure out how it works.
And we'll obviously link it within the blog post related on the webcast as well.
Yeah, of course. Now, just let me start the sample application to show you how it works, and then I will explain you some inner details. So, through the home page of this web application, which is a classic ASP.NET MVC application. I don't have any kind of custom branding to make it behave like Office 365. It is just a classic MVC intranet application. I have a register connector section. If I click on this button, this link under the cover of the button will bring you to the connectors developer dashboard, which is the UI, the tool that you can use to register your own connectors tenant-wide. Here you can click on the new connector button, and you can provide, and you have to provide because it is mandatory, the connector name, a logo, which will be used to identify the connector from a UI perspective, description, a detailed description, as well as a company website, which is still mandatory. Think about that. Then you can provide just as a description the list of events that you will provide to any target group that will be connected with your connector. And those two links are the most useful. The first one is the landing page for your users, and it is the link which will have the connect button to create the connection between your connector and any target group. Could be, in our case, the home page of our site, just to make an example. And the redirect URL, which is really, really fundamental. This is the URL to which the web browser of the end users will be redirected once they will connect, and when they will connect your connector with a group. So, whenever they will click the orange button, they will be brought to a page which is provided out of the box by Office 365. They will select the group to connect to. They will click the connect button, and they will be redirected to this page. And this page will get in the query string all of the arguments that will be used to get the webhook URL, the group name, and all the other stuff we saw in the slide deck. So, once you have set the terms and you click the Save button, you will get back in this area the HTML code that you can use to reproduce the orange button in your UI. Let me go back and let me show you the already registered connector that we have. As you can see here, I have, for example, this URL for the redirect URL, and I have the HTML for the orange button. Well, you can copy this guy, and once you are done with the development and with the testing, you can also publish your connector on the public store, as I told you. Now, I already have this connector registered, so I can simply do that. I can connect my connector with any of the groups I have in my tenant. As you can see, this is the orange button that you get, and this is exactly the HTML, just this area, the orange button, that you can copy from the registration page we just saw. If I click on this button, my browser will be brought to a page which is provided by Office 365, as you can see, and which will get in the UI, in the query string, the state, which is a custom input that I have, and I can have, it's optional, which will be provided to my callback URL in order to provide custom inputs to the connection page. I have the ID of my connector, and I have the callback URL, which is the one we defined in the connector registration. Now I will select the connector webcast group, which is the one we created before, and I will allow the connection between my connector and that target group. By clicking the Allow button, you will see my browser will be redirected to the callback URL we registered, getting in the query string the state argument, as well as the webhook URL, and the group name somewhere here. Here it is. So, under the cover, I have an ASP.NET MVC implementation which will get these query string parameters, and will use these parameters to configure, to save on a persistent storage the settings of the connection that now we have in place. So now I can send a card using this connector. So I have a link to the send card page, to which I can select my group, the connectors webcast group, and for example, I can send this card. The card will be sent to the target group.
And really, Paolo, while it's doing that, so technically it's not you sending the card, it is this application which is sending the card, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You are signed in here. So, and that's a really, really, really important thing to realize, because that means that you might have whatever daily testing, unit testing, or daily results, or whatever coming from SAP, and you would be able to get those flooded in the group as well. So it really doesn't matter what are we actually sending, as long as the connection is established.
Exactly. For example, in a project I made just a few months ago, we used this technique to send messages from a workflow running on the SharePoint side of the story to a group, which is used as the UI to see the flow process, and we use the connector, one connector, to send cards to the group, just to show the evolution of the workflow through the UI and through the conversation wall of the group. This is just an example of many possible examples.
Exactly.
And as you can see here, now we have the new activity button. We can click it, and we can see that we have a new message. Well, we have two messages. One that informs us that there is a new connection, the one we made before, and one more, which is the card that the application sent to my target group. So, again, from a user perspective, pretty easy. From a development perspective, let me show you how the application is built. So
before we go there, actually, just a quick point. In this case, obviously, the card itself is super simple. It just has a subject and a description, but it could have HTML links, it could have images, and all of that in the card as well. So you have the full flexibility on the message section. Isn't that right, Paolo?
Yeah, it is totally true. And one nice and interesting thing to know is that whenever you want to create HTML-like elements in the cards, you will have to use the Markdown syntax instead of the HTML one. So if you want to put a link, you will use the syntax with the square brackets and all the stuff you use when you create an MD document, for example, on GitHub, which is really interesting because you can reuse your knowledge if you are used to play with the GitHub and with MD documents, also when creating cards, which is nice.
Really nice.
So now let me show you how the application works under the cover, at least briefly. So I just have one real controller in my MVC application, in which I have some really useless links like the index page and the new connection page, but the real meat is here in the connect action, which is the one which will be invoked by the callback request coming from the Office 365 environment to my connector. Here I can get through the query string the state argument, the webhook URL argument, the group name, and the error, if any, as I told you during the slide deck. In case of any error, of course I need to handle that error, and I will create a new response which will be provided by a custom view, which is connection error, and which will provide custom information about the error just happened. On the other side, if everything is okay, the error will be empty. So we can go forward and we can create the real connection. And here, just for the sake of simplicity, in this demo, I decided to not use any database, any real enterprise level repository. I just use a JSON file, which is stored locally in my app data folder, just for the sake of simplicity. And here I store all of the information about the group, the state of the group, and the webhook URL of the webhook that I can use to send messages to my target group. So just to keep it simple. Of course, if you want to reuse this as a starting point, most likely you will have to do some refactoring and you have to create a database, maybe using Entity Framework or whatever else. But this is just to keep it simple and easy to be used and to be inspected by you if you are interested. So whenever we send a card, which is the other interesting part of the story, we simply get the available connections, and we prepare a startup ready-to-go card in the text area. And once the end user will click the send button, we will have an HTTP post against this new action, send card, which will simply make an HTTP post request against the webhook URL, providing the content of the card and specifying the application JSON content type. Nothing more than that. Under the cover, this HTTP helper is a class helper class of my own, which we use also in the Graph SDK samples. And under the cover of this method, we simply create an HTTP client object. We set the content, which will be the string or the JSON content of the card. And just here, we prepare the request message, and we send it asynchronously, waiting for the result. So I would say really
super
easy
simple
and straightforward.
Yeah, surprisingly simple thing to actually do the connection between the things. So really, really nice to see that it's as simple as it is. So obviously this helper thingy will help a lot, but still it's really around just sending a post back, which is great.
And just to show you one last thing, in the view that we have in the connection page, which should be this one if I'm not mistaken, exactly, here I have this guy, or better, this guy, which is just the HTML code I got from the registration, and I copied and pasted into this page. Of course, so if you want to play with your own connectors, you should do the registration and then come here and update this HTML to do the registration. Because as you can see here, I have my custom state and I have the ID of my connector, which should be changed based on the connector that you want to connect, of course. So that said, I think we can go back to the deck, to the slide deck. Mainly just to say that we want to thank you for attending this webcast. I don't know if you have any question or feedback, Lisa, or whatever else.
So I think, yeah, really great webcast around showing the capabilities and showing the simplicity of the whole thing. So I think there's still a lot of kind of uncertainty for people, and people don't know how these connectors actually work and what are the scenarios for the connectors. But I think there's a lot of interesting scenarios related on notifications from different systems. They could be LOB systems. You could hook in your Azure hosted web application using service bus towards the on-premises, and then have a hybrid connectivity to on-premises systems and whatever. So there's a lot of different opportunities around these connectors. We should actually probably implement an example scenario around the hybrid connector, which we connect towards on-prem. But let's do that as a following step. So obviously this initial sample is already great, and then we can further evolve that story later on. But I think that's it. So thank you everybody for joining and watching the video, and we'll make sure that we have the right links to the additional resources in the video notes and in the blog post related on the webcast. But thank you, Paolo.
Thank you.
Any last words from your side?
No, just want to say thank you for attending this webcast and enjoy with the connectors.
Yes, thank you everybody. Cheers. Bye-bye.